Hi there, thanks for watching. I hope you're enjoying the conference. My name is Alexander Overtoom. I'm Head of Business Development at the Things Industries, and today I'm going to share with you our latest digital twin as a service proposition. And probably you know that our core product is the LoRaWAN network server, but the network server is always just a part of a larger end-to-end IoT solution. And we want all to get a well-orchestrated end-to-end solution. And in order to get there, we need to manage the dependencies on the hardware, on the cloud platform, but also on the physical part of the network, being the radio network, being the gateways and the devices. And with that comes one of the major pains in maintaining a LoRaWAN network, which is about the physical infrastructure, because managing physical infrastructure is painful. Hardware is never easy and it tends to fail on us, and that's the pain that we're trying to alleviate with the digital twin as a service. And you may know, because you have been there, but the installation of and maintenance of physical equipment can be a straight-on nightmare. We've had a few examples in the past. What you can see here is at the Port of Amsterdam, where we are trying to install a smart parking sensor. There are a bunch of people involved, 6 including me taking the picture, and there is so much alignment required to get that parking sensor into the ground that this becomes very inefficient, and the delivery time is also increasing. So it's inefficient. Here you see a shipped pre-provisioned gateway where the wiring was done wrong. The copper wires were exposed because too much of the cover was stripped off, resulting in a short circuit that eventually almost set the gateway on fire. And what this is showcasing is that there's often mistakes done in the installation because it's done by people without the right competence. Another thing that we see regularly is that maintenance needs to be done after deployment, because you can always have unforeseen circumstances. You can always have a security vulnerability that needs to be patched with a firmware upgrade, but you don't have remote access. So what's going to happen then, right? Either you need to remotely swap out the devices, or, as you can see in this picture, this also happens, have a field service to drive by your locations to do a remote upgrade via BLE or Wi-Fi, and this adds a huge cost to your operational expenditures for maintaining the network. Also, what we see often is overpromises with regards to battery lifetime. What needs to happen then is that a battery needs to be swapped, or an entire device needs to be swapped even before it was expected to need a swap. And these problems, they result in a prohibitive total cost of ownership, because you have to deal with returns or repairs. But also think about the opportunity cost. Most of the LoRaWAN solution providers are not installation companies, and they could do something better with their time rather than having to worry about the physical installation and the maintenance. And also, if you're doing these installations, think about the inefficiencies, because a proper installation at scale requires a systemic approach, but it also requires a steep learning curve. I mean, of course, you'll do 10 devices inefficiently because that doesn't matter, but imagine you have to do 1,000 or more, and you'll likely give up. So what digital twin as a service entails is to give the LoRaWAN solution providers the opportunity to focus on their core business, on what they're good at, rather than having to worry about these physical deployments. Because the last mile of IoT is a specialty, and we want to make that more accessible with a new service. And although you will never be able to get a service level agreement on the delivery of a data packet to your application server, at least you can have a service level agreement on the availability of the equipment itself, which includes timely replacements. It can include the return processes, a support desk that you can call, and combining these services are getting us closer to a IoT as device as a service proposition. And device as a service has been around for quite some time. Traditionally it was around printers, desktops and Wi-Fi access points, but now with IoT it can also be extended to low power wide area networks, and create that into a managed service. So one service provider that takes charge of the equipment's full life cycle. They do the procurement, they do the configuration, they take care of logistics, and they also perform maintenance and even decommission the hardware at the end of its life. And we see that as a missing link in successful LoRaWAN deployments. So what we've decided to do is to offer, together with a partner who does global IT field services, offer this service to our customers so that we can also provide a service level agreement on the availability and the proper functioning of your installed base, so that you don't have to worry about that. And the idea is one contract, one point of contact, and lower cost than when you would do it yourself. So that doesn't just include the procurement, but it includes the total life cycle costs, which is also the firmware updates, the security patches, and the decommissioning at the end. So what does it encompass? The LoRaWAN device as a service can be delivered in EU and US. There's going to be an SLA on the availability of the equipment itself. It will include someone going up to a site for installation, or someone going up to a site for battery swaps in case of a dead battery or faulty equipment swaps. It takes care of the logistics. That includes inventory management. It also includes first line support when you see a red LED blinking, for example. And it includes also of course the LoRaWAN network server, and optionally a backhaul. And the beauty of it is that it's a OPEX model, which means that you do not need to invest into the hardware yourself, because that's done by this service, and it's calculated as a lease fee that you would pay on a monthly basis. And then with the upcoming e-waste regulations, also already think about this, we can take charge of the decommissioning of a device at the end of its life cycle, rather than you discarding the electronics in the normal bin. So, a few requirements. EU and US, as I mentioned. It's a wholesale deal, so the service applies to 100 sites plus. And maybe you ask, what is a site? It could be anything really. A supermarket, a restaurant, it could be a warehouse, anything that's relatively easy to access. We also set a number of requirements to the devices. For example, they need to be LoRa Alliance certified, but they also need to be compliancy tested. So we have a number of requirements that a device and a LoRa and a gateway need to meet, and they're, for example, around the implementation of ADR when they're stationary, but it's also around how do they perform in relation to their power consumption. And we want to make sure that indeed the promised battery lifetime can be achieved when we deploy these devices on your behalf in the field. It's about relatively easy to access sites, indoor or accessible outdoor placements, and the service is also applicable to companies that already have their own IT field service operation. To give you an idea about the cost, these tend to be longer term contracts, so 3 years or 5 years, and as an example, for 5 years and a full service contract, including 1 gateway and 6 devices, you would pay around to 45 euros per site per month. So now we were talking about the IoT device as a service. Let's look at the digital twin as a service, because that means a step extra. So we don't want to just virtualize the data of one sensor or a collection of IoT devices, but we also want to augment that data with production and operating processes, but also contextual metadata. And although that service may not be there yet for LoRaWAN, let me talk you through a few things that we are working on. One of the things, as I said, we need to add extra layers of data. So in that way, a digital twin can help a company to make even smarter decisions. Imagine, for example, the connection of a building information system to an HR planning tool. And the HR planning tool can provide input around new hires, resignations, or longer-term staff planning, so that if you combine those sources of data, eventually you can feed into the property lease planning to make sure that the allocation of office square meters is optimized over time. And although this may seem like a bit out of scope for what we're discussing today, the bottom line is that we need a common language to feed into the digital twin. Because if we have a common language, it will become much easier to model and to integrate different sources of data. And let's, for example, take Azure IoT as an example. The language used in IoT Hub is called Digital Twin as a Digital Twin Definitions Language, or DTDL, and that's a format for sensor data that feeds into this digital twin. And that means that for a digital twin service, the application data format may be presented with an extra semantic layer, in this case called JSON LD for linked data, to support the data ontologies that are defined in Azure. And having this will make building digital twins native to your cloud platform of choice. And we are going to also integrate with that language. And as a final step, of course, you need to understand the health of your device population. You don't just want to act on application layer data, but also on the metadata that tells you something about the health of your device fleet. You want to act on events that matter, like signal reliability, battery status, etc. And that's why we are building a device diagnostics service. And we have the building blocks there already, like the device repository, like the event server. And the idea is that device events are delivered by the event server to the new analytics service, and that will add discrete or machine learning based analysis. And the outcomes of these analysis are then used to enrich the device profiles that are stored in the device repository. And the device repository in this way becomes a database of device performance benchmarks that are purely based off of empirical data rather than of a vendor produced data sheet. And the idea of this is that you can perform preventive maintenance, or that we can give you advice on how to set up your network, maybe where to place additional gateways, etc., to make your networks more resilient, but also to bring down the costs of your networks, because that's the main objective. We want to make managing fleets of devices and gateways easier and cheaper, and in fact we don't want you to worry about this at all, which is why we have decided to come up with this IoT device as a service proposition. And if you want to know more about it, please visit me at the booth. I'll be there, or one of my colleagues will be there, and otherwise please send me an email. Thank you for watching. I hope you will enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.